We'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to today's session. It's the last in our series. Hopefully you may have gotten a chance to attend some others this week in bringing some balance back into our lives in the midst of what's been a really challenging fall semester. So today's session is an introduction to mindfulness. And my name is Angie Brown. I'm Assistant Director for UFHR Communications and Worklife. I'm also a member of the UF Mindfulness team. And I'm certified as a workplace mindfulness facilitator. I've been meditating for just a little over 10 years. That's what brings me here to you today. So as we get started here, I do want to say if you have thoughts or ideas, questions at any point during today's presentation, I'm very happy to have you interrupt me anywhere along the way so that I can provide clarification, or if you just have a thought to share, I encourage you to use the chat for that purpose in today's session. So for today, we're going to go through some myths and realities about what mindfulness is and what it isn't. We're going to talk about how mindfulness can show up in our everyday lives and some dimensions of mindfulness. We'll talk about elements of a successful meditation. So, and how meditation kind of is distinguished from is distinctive from what mindfulness is. We'll do a brief experiential practice, about 5 minutes, and then we'll talk a bit about how you can incorporate mindfulness more into your day. So, since this is an introductory session, some of you I realize may have experience with mindfulness and with meditation. If that's the case, I think this presentation can still be a benefit, and hopefully you can take a beginner's mind approach to what we talk about and get just a bit of a break in your day. But if any of these concepts or anything I go through are confusing, for people who are new to this, please don't hesitate to let me know. So to get us started, I'd like to start out by asking you, when I say the word mindfulness, if you could in the chat share what word or image maybe comes to mind for you, a word or two, an image, a thought of what mindfulness is. I'll keep an eye here. Present moment, the present, pondering, paying attention, being present, aware, lots of being present, meditation. Focus on what we're doing. This is good. Buddhism, one person thinks of Buddhism, peace, aware of what's around you, focusing on what's happening near and around you and blocking out distraction. So this is a good sophisticated crowd that we've got here today. So I'll tell you what a lot of people think about, focus on every activity. What a lot of people think about, what comes to mind for a lot of people when they think about mindfulness is kind of escapist images, right? So we have this image of a stack of rocks or a beautiful woman, probably in Bali or somewhere beautiful, doing yoga and meditating. We have the lotus flower, which not inaccurate images, but they do tend to give us a sense of escapism, right? That we have to get away from everything in order to experience a sense of mindfulness. And it's definitely important to take time away to kind of reset and be able to feel more centered and in touch with ourselves, but it's not necessarily what mindfulness is. And you all actually gave us some really good examples, and presence came up a lot of what mindfulness is. And I'd like to suggest that mindfulness is being fully present to what's happening within you and around you in the present, and importantly with less judgment. So that's one piece that I think a lot of us don't necessarily think about. But if we're training ourselves to become better observers, both of our own thoughts and actions, as well as what's around us, it's important to temper that with a bit less judgment than we might be used to. And we'll talk more about that. So what I'd like to suggest is that mindfulness actually looks a bit like this. So it's the way we show up in our everyday life with our family. We see this woman who's down on the level of her child, listening very intently to what he has to say, not rushing with him kind of tailing behind her. It happens, in Zoom meetings. I've shared this before. I'm guilty of being a Zoom multitasker. I suspect some of you may be today. I'm not going to judge that because I'm very guilty of it myself, but we've got a couple screens open and we're kind of keeping an ear on one thing while trying to do another. But during Zoom meetings, we can be, much more present to the person we're talking to or what we're working on with a group. And it can be getting lost in your research or activities that you're doing, and reconnecting deeply to the passion of your work. So I'd like us to think about mindfulness from that perspective today. So kind of the Western godfather of mindfulness in the United States is a person who works he's a physician at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center by the name of John Kabat-Zinn. And he helped to start an 8-week program that you might have heard of called mindfulness-based stress reduction. That was actually found to be highly effective with patients experiencing pain in the clinics where he was working. So he was working initially with physical pain, but realized there's a mental component to that pain as well. And what he learned and what he came to realize, and he wrote a book called This Full Catastrophe Living, is that when it comes right down to it, the challenge of mindfulness is to realize that this is it. And right now, this is my life. And the question is, what's my relationship going to be? So many times what happens when we're living through something like what we're living through right now is that we experience the pain of isolation or having to put together a course that's going to be in high flex, or trying to deal with how our children are going to be going to school. And that's painful and difficult and challenging. And another mindfulness practitioner that I really admire named Tara Brach talks about how that's like an arrow that's fired, right? We experience that arrow, it's painful. But what often happens is that we fire a second arrow, and that arrow comes in the form of anger and frustration and kind of futile emotional reactions that don't serve us in a way that's productive or make us feel better in our everyday lives. They're counterproductive, right? And so what mindfulness can help us do is avoid firing that second arrow, because we become aware of it before we can fire it. So that's one of the benefits of a mindfulness, of practicing mindfulness, and we'll talk about meditation shortly, is that we become more in tune with when those thoughts or ideas come up and say, well, I realize that's not going to be helpful and I have a choice here. I can choose how I want to respond to the situation in a way that's going to be productive for myself or for my family, for my colleagues, and what we have. I was talking to a group of leaders this morning in our leadership program about the phrase, it is what it is. So that phrase, I couldn't figure out why that phrase was really making me cringe. I just hear people saying it over and over. And I think it's because the idea that they have is that it is what it is, which implies a surrender, and surrender to what is important. But it's also important to not be resigned, and it has a negativity about it, right? Like there's the anger kind of and frustration behind it, and well, that's it. But if we can take what is and realize that there's a surrender to it, and I can be creative in this moment in my way that I'm going to approach it or react to it. That can make a huge difference in our psyches and the way we go about our daily lives. So I encourage you to think about that as we go through these really challenging times. I'd like to pause there for just a moment and see if there are any questions so far. Like I said, I'll tend to kind of rapid fire go through this, but I encourage you as I go, if you have questions, just let me know. So mindfulness really uses our body senses to anchor us in the present moment, to notice and acknowledge our reactions and emotions, as I was just talking about, and again, not judging those in a good or bad way. So there's 7 attitudes that we can cultivate, and these do stem from Buddhism, as somebody pointed out in the Q&A section here. But just like many of our kind of secular approaches to daily life, they can be informed by religious traditions, but these are not religious by nature. And they are helpful when thinking about mindfulness practice. So non-judging means not getting kind of caught up in our stream of likes and dislikes, but being able to break the pattern by questioning kind of what those reactions means and let them arise without acting on them immediately in a certain way or in a habitual way. It's cultivating patience so that we allow things to be exactly as they are and unfold as they do, without trying to change anything that, or striving to change something that might be out of our control. It's adopting a beginner's mind so that we're approaching an experience every time as though it's the first time, which can actually add a dimension of richness to our life and also allow us to approach things in a more creative way. It's developing trust and faith in our intuition, which inherently begins to show up in trust in others in an interesting way. When we're able to trust ourselves, it becomes easier to trust and become more vulnerable with other people, which can really be a helpful practice. It's non-striving, so there's no goal other than being oneself. I was again talking this morning about how genuine confidence doesn't come from putting on a certain kind of face, even though we might adopt a power pose or we might do things to try to make ourselves more confident. But true confidence and authenticity comes from being centered on ourselves and having the comfort that and the trust in ourselves that what we're doing is coming from an authentic place and not being insecure about that. Acceptance of things as they are in the presence, and letting go, so not elevating certain thoughts or feelings and rejecting others. If you missed it earlier this week, if you chose kind of one of these presentations, I encourage you to check out the recording that we sent out in UF at Work yesterday of Irene Astoris's presentation on letting go, on pressing the reset button, where she talks about letting in, letting be, and letting go. It was a really, really good session that she gave. So if these are the attitudes of mindfulness, then how can they show up kind of in our daily lives? So in our wellness efforts here at the university, we have what's called the 8 windows to wellness that we tend to think about, a multidimensional approach to wellness. And so in our emotional realm, mindfulness can show up as an increased sense of self-acceptance if we're kind of developing that sense of inner trust. It can also manifest in the outward world as an increased sense of awe and build some sense of contentment with what is. In our social relationships, it can kind of help us prune relationships where we can. Some relationships are just there and we work with those as they are, but some we may realize don't nurture us. And so we find ways to ensure that we're seeking out quality relationships and pruning ones that are not serving us well and not reacting again habitually to those. So we're seeking quality over quantity or habit. And we're improving our listening skills because if we're more mindful and present, then we're going to be more able to kind of take in and less focused on anxieties that may be happening behind the scenes for us. In the spiritual realm, it can help manifest a deeper sense of connection, whether that's a secular or non-secular sense of connection. It can connect us to a greater sense of purpose. I'm noticing a comment over here from Paula. So many of these 7 attitudes are not typical of what academics do. Yeah, I mean, it's a paradox that that does exist in the academic world, the striving. I agree, Paula, but that's why we're here kind of working on it together. So in the environmental realm, it can come up in more of a sense of a care for the earth and appreciation of nature. As you're walking from meeting to meeting or on campus, it can be amazing how we're going through thoughts about our next step, our next thing that we need to take care of during the day. And we may miss this gorgeous campus that's around us and the kind of gratitude that can well up, which can lead to a greater sense of well-being just on a day-to-day basis by just kind of looking around and noticing the beauty of nature that surrounds us. Yeah, just a comment. Yeah, I understand. In the financial realm, mindfulness can show up in terms of our spending habits. We become less unconscious about the way we're spending our money. We might make more wise choices. And also what can come up is a sense of having enough, right? So, You know, do you need the latest iPhone? Do you need the latest of you know, whatever? It really kind of stops you in your tracks and makes you kind of look at what you have and maybe developing a sense of, well, what I have here is perfectly functional. There's no need to be kind of persuaded by the outside world. There's something else that I need to acquire or have to keep up with the Joneses, sort of, so to speak. In our occupational life, mindfulness can show up as less reactivity, less multitasking. You know, we've read study after study that shows how multitasking can actually be detrimental to our productivity. It's counterintuitive, but finding your focus can really improve your productivity ultimately, which is of course important for academics. And it can help us find balance. So there may be weeks where you know that you want to spend 80 hours pouring yourself into a research project or some work that you have to do. And it's not judging that, you know, that can be okay. That doesn't make you a workaholic, because the next week you may find that, you know, you realize that you've done what you needed to do. And now it's time to turn your attention back to your family life or your home life or your personal well-being. So tuning in more to, you know, not having judgment of this is a good or bad, I'm working too much, I'm working too little, I'm not paying enough attention to my family, or I am. It's really kind of noting that that can change from day to day and week to week, and not becoming caught in a habitual stream again of this is how it is, but pausing that and seeing, well, what's needed right now in this moment to bring me the best result in my life. In the physical realm, mindfulness can mean finding movement that feels good, so that we're not exercising from a driven, addictive standpoint, but we're actually finding movement that nurtures us, that when we get done, we notice, yeah, that was the right thing to make me feel better in this moment. Not that it's 5 o'clock, I have to go to the gym, I have to do this kind of a workout and it's uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it in this kind of driven manner. In terms of eating, it's eating very consciously, again, not from a either overindulging or a dieting perspective, but more from a perspective of, I know when I eat this, I'm going to feel better afterwards. My alertness is going to be better. Tuning into those kinds of signals, mindfulness can be critical to those kinds of practices. In the intellectual realm, it can be finding our focus and flow and tuning in more to identification of our passions. So that, you know, while I'm working, is this work feeding me? Well, yes, you know, I remember now why I chose this line of work, or why I went into this academic field, because it really feeds my soul. Or maybe pausing and saying, why am I still doing this? You know, maybe it's time for a change. So given all that, what is meditation? What does that have to do with mindfulness? So we conflate those two oftentimes. People think that mindfulness actually is meditation. And I'll say, as a busy working single mother, for a long time when I was going through a difficult period, I was meditating very regularly, and I aim to meditate regularly. It's important, as I'll talk about later, to do so. But meditation can also come in the form of practices of, so what I'll do oftentimes now when I'm really busy is I love to cook, and while I'm cooking dinner, I'll just try to be completely in the moment, you know, focusing on my breath and what it is that I'm, you know, cutting up a carrot or whatever I'm doing in that moment. So those can be mindfulness practices, but meditation practice is setting aside time in your day to concentrate and focus on an object, whether that object is your breath or a mantra or a visualization. And really visualization, it's important to think about in terms of maybe a static visualization or a focus on a word. A mantra is usually a word that we repeat to ourselves, something to kind of bring your focus to a laser point. And so it's important to think about, but not visualization in terms of daydreaming. Daydreaming is different than meditation. Meditation is trying to bring our focus into a single point of focus. So mindfulness meditation is one where you're focused on keeping yourself in the present moment. And a good example is focusing on your breath. A lot of people focus on either counting or the breath as a starting place in meditation. And the reason we meditate, just like a classical pianist or any kind of musician or athlete, the reason anybody practices is to get better at something. So when we're practicing meditation, what we're really doing is training our brains, right? So it's a training of sorts. So meditation can get wound up with a lot of what I've been calling woo-woo, kind of, not to discount those practices, because they can be critically important if you have a passion for them or if you're drawn to them. for a certain kind of line of Buddhist practice or contemplative Christian practice or whatever that may be. But these practices can also be treated, transcendental meditation, somebody recommended. There are a number of forms of meditation. I don't recommend a particular one. I'm drawn to Vipassana because it's fairly free of any dogma or anything else, which for me works very well because my mind will tend to go on the dogma. And transcendental meditation is very similar to that. I'll talk about at the very end. UF Mindfulness, the mindfulness.ufl.edu has links to a number of different meditation groups in town. So if you want to explore, it's really individual. The meditation that you do is really designed to be whatever resonates with you and you find to be effective. So I encourage you to explore, and I'm always happy to talk about it because I've done a fair amount of exploring myself. But so a daily practice, though, can be very secular, and it can be just to be a matter of setting aside, 5 minutes in your day to sit and focus on one of these. And again, I recommend starting with the breath and practicing to cultivate this kind of being in the world. So there are 4 elements of what we call a successful meditation, and immediately successful is kind of a trigger word because what it generates is a sense of it's either going to be good or bad, right? And the whole idea is that we want to go into meditation with no expectations and no judgments of what it should be like. And I see a question here, so I'm going to pause. So Diane is asking, what is the website that you recommended to find a meditation group in town? And I'll put it in the chat afterwards. But it's and I think I may have it at the end here. It's mindfulness.ufl.edu. So right here on campus, we have a group called UF Mindfulness. Thank you, Lori, put it in the chat there. So if you'll stay with me right now, but bookmark that one. That is a really good, there's all kinds of resources. There's readings, links to groups in town, and so you can begin to explore, but I can't guarantee what groups are doing. I think a lot are meeting virtually. And in fact, the UF Mindfulness group has a regular Monday at 5:30 meeting that you can do via Zoom here within our UF community. So 4 elements of a successful meditation, as I was saying, what happens a lot of time when people are first beginning to meditate is they immediately are frustrated because they can't stop their thoughts. So the goal, the expectation is that my thoughts will stop when I'm successful at this. And it's key to know that you're not going to stop your thoughts. The thoughts are going to continue to arise because that's how we're built. You're not going to stop blinking. You're not going to stop breathing. There are natural things that happen in the body, and thinking, having thoughts is one of those. That's not to say that down the road, if you've been meditating for a long period of time, that eventually things will quiet down quite a bit. And what I've found is, for me, a 5-minute meditation will help center me quite a bit, but the thoughts are not likely to stop until I'm probably 10 minutes into a meditation, if it's a good day, which I'm not going to call that a good day, but that is where, if I'll have a meditation where I'm stopping, the thoughts kind of stop coming, it's going to take a little while to get to that point. But there's no problem with thoughts coming up. And so it's important to think about them almost like a little puppy. There's a metaphor where the puppy comes up and you don't want to kick away the puppy. You don't want to, punish the puppy. You don't want to punish yourself, but you want to gently just say, and you don't need to say this many words, but just have a kind of an indicator in your mind come up to say, we don't need to do that right now. It's just a few minutes and then I'll come back to that. That thought will still be there, and just kind of pat it on the head and have it sit in the corner if it can, and just continue to kind of redirect it that way. And that sounds like a lot of motion, but you'll begin to find that it happens kind of instinctively. Something will come up, you'll see it, and you'll kind of let it go by like a cloud in the sky. So we have days where we look up in the sky and there are no clouds and it's a sunny day and we think that's a good day. We look up in the sky and there might be clouds. I actually like cloudy days, but there might be clouds kind of going across the sky. There's no good or bad about that. It's just, that's how things are. That's nature. So try to approach your meditation with no expectations or judgment and be an observer. Oh, I see there's a thought going across. Again, not getting in a conversation about it, but just noticing and letting it go. And again, adopt a beginner's mind. So every time you sit down, it's going to be different. So there's no expectation of sitting down and, oh, yesterday it was like this, or yesterday was so great. Oh, and today is not good. You know, just, it's a practice, right? A pianist is going to sit down and they're going to have a practice every day. And it's going to go the way it goes because we're practicing getting better at being present. And that's what we're doing. So any questions about meditation before we kind of give a little bit of a try to practice? Okay. So I'm going to kind of put you in the mood here with this image before we go into, we're going to do just a 5-minute meditation. So I have a habit of taking pictures, trying to capture at the ocean just any number of lighting situations, but I always am frustrated by the attempt to get a sunset picture. Sunset pictures are difficult to capture. And I grew up in Oregon, and this is a picture of the Oregon coast where I grew up. And I, on a recent visit, was really excited when I had my little digital, my phone, a photo, and I saw a thumbnail. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I really captured a good one, right? And I got home later and blew it up on my computer and looked at it. I'm like, well, what are those specks, in the sky? Like that ruins it. Why? How did what? I wonder if I can Photoshop that out. I wonder if I can make that go away somehow. And after a while of kind of staring at it, I thought, well, those are birds, and that's okay. It's kind of nice to have birds flying out, and they're supposed to be there, and it's just funny to me. So especially when I look at it right now, it's just so clear to me that those are birds flying across the sky. So as we approach meditation, again, I encourage you to think about, you wouldn't want those birds to go away. They're going to fly across the sky occasionally, and those are your thoughts. And with the same with the ocean. So a lot of people talk about the metaphor of the waves being like thoughts. And occasionally, on some days, those waves are going to be stormy and chaotic. And other days it's going to be fairly placid. And you wouldn't want it to be any other way. You want that to come and go. And you can treat yourself with that same gentle kind of approach when you sit down to meditate. So I'm going to turn off my camera or take myself off video here while we do this practice, so there's no distraction. At least I thought I was going to, yeah. And so what I encourage you to do is just wherever you're sitting, just sit up tall, with your back straight but relaxed. And to the best of your ability, just try to relax your entire body while maintaining a kind of a straight, somewhat alert posture. You can have both feet on the floor if you're sitting in your chair, and your hands can just rest gently in your lap. You can gently close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. Or if you prefer, you can just simply have a soft downward gaze in front of you. So relax and give yourself permission to let go of your busy day, your busy life for the next few moments. And be present here and now. You can have a relaxed body, an alert mind. Your breath is natural, so you can breathe through your nose if that's comfortable. You're not trying to force any kind of breath, just allow it to be however it is right now. So as we begin, remember that we have no expectations, no judgments, just simple observation. So this is an easy, short, basic breath meditation. See if you can really experience the breath by noticing the sensations in your body as you breathe. And feel your body breathing. So without changing your breath at all, just have a natural breath. Simply pay attention to how it feels to breathe and rest with your breath. Now, to more fully experience your breath, notice what parts of your body move as you breathe in and out. Notice the gentle rise and fall of your chest, your abdomen, with each breath. Each breath might be different from moment to moment. Have no judgment whatsoever of yourself or your breath. Notice how your body breathes, all on its own. Ride the waves of your breath. It helps to focus. You can say to yourself as you breathe, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Be a kind and curious observer, a non-judgmental observer. I invite you to tune into your body and see what kind of breath might feel good to do. So you can stay with this natural breath if you'd like, or perhaps take some relaxed, deeper breaths. So you can play with this and take a moment to breathe in a way that you would like. changed your breath at all, go ahead and return to the natural breath. And let's take some time to slowly end this meditation. So take a few slow, deep breaths. And begin to bring your awareness back into the room where you are. You can move your feet, feeling the contact of your feet to the floor. You can move your fingers and hands gently, wiggle around a bit. And when you're ready, if your eyes are closed, you can slowly open your eyes. And I invite you to check in with yourself now to see how you're feeling and what your state of being is. And remember, there's no right or wrong answers, no judgment, just observe. And you're welcome to, of course, stay in kind of this quiet place. But if you'd like, you're also welcome to share any experiences or observations in the chat with others that are here with us today. I'm looking at a comment from Shannon that says she's used her breath as focus for a few years. Oh, had lung surgery. Oh, any recommendations on focus to stop the intermittent pain from being distracted? Yeah, so Shannon, I'm looking at your question. I'm hesitant to answer too detailed because I'm not a medical practitioner, and so it's hard for me to understand what you're experiencing and how best to work with that. So I'd encourage you, of course, to talk to your doctor about that. But I will say, based on the Jon Kabat-Zinn, studies that I mentioned earlier, that it's, again, not trying to push that pain away. So I don't want to minimize that pain. I know that that is problematic. But maybe try to treat it with a friendly gesture and not try to push it away or wish it were different, as difficult as I know that must be. I don't want to give you an easy answer for that, but that would be my instinct, is to, again, think about that second arrow and avoid fighting it or being upset about it as much as you can, and just being gentle with it in a responsive, kind way. That's the best answer I think I could give to that. Gail says you keep getting distracted, and so I see a sad face. But Gail, that's totally normal. I get distracted all the time. And so again, don't, this is we're learning how to do something new. And so anytime you're doing something new, it's not going to be like, oh, it's right there. It just, know that those distractions are okay, and that's part of what we're working with. If you could even take a humorous kind of approach to it, that might help to say, oh, there they are again. And, I'm just going to keep bringing myself back and see if that helps. So many thoughts. So somebody says, I'm sorry, Zinyet, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but how long does it take to slow down the thoughts? And, like I mentioned, especially if this is new, just kind of try to release that and not worry. It's okay that the thoughts are coming up. I did a bit of contemplative practice. I've tried a lot of different traditions, and I tried a contemplative Christian tradition for a while. Father Thomas Keating is a priest or monk, that led that movement. And he talks about, he gave me a thought about something that's really helpful for me to think about, that's called offloading. Just know that there's going to be a period of time where those thoughts are going to have to arise and kind of float away, and just allow that. When I can think about it as kind of this purging that needs to happen, then I don't feel as frustrated by it, because I just know that this is going to happen for the first few minutes of my practice. And so I just let them come up and just know that it's almost like a cleansing opportunity. That's how I approach the thoughts coming up. And so, like I mentioned earlier, if you have the time to maybe extend your practice so that you can, start out with 5, build it up to 10. I think you'll find after 10 to 15 minutes, things really start to quiet down. And if that's what you're seeking, if that's really what you were wanting to find, think about that as just a time where your mind has to kind of get rid of these thoughts and let that be. Again, don't treat it like it's something bad. There's nothing bad about having thoughts come up. Stopping the pain from being distracting, Shannon says. I think just not treating it as a distraction and just like you wouldn't treat blinking or any other bodily function as a distraction, but something natural that's happening is probably, again, approaching it with kindness is the best thing that you can do. So if it's distracting, it's calling to you. The pain is telling you something, and you can say, yeah, this is, I've the pain, and to hopefully, I hope for your sake, it goes away over time as well. Birds in the photo is a good focal point. I'm glad. Yeah, it makes me laugh that I was angry about it and even willing to Photoshop them out at one point, and now I'm ashamed of that. Mantra-based meditations most useful to quiet the thoughts. And like I said, yeah, I've experimented with mantra as well. You can get mala beads, which are sacred, and so I don't want to undermine that. But if you have mala beads, those can be really nice for mantras. And a mantra doesn't need to be a Sanskrit repetition. It can be. For me, that works sometimes because it's not English and it's not going to turn into a thought. It's just a sound. To me, because it doesn't have words associated with it, but you can also just say that, in Christian contemplative practices, it's just saying the word love or peace over and over, whatever that could be. It can be secular, but mantra can be really valuable practice for when the thoughts are intrusive. By repeating a mantra, then you're kind of crowding out that stuff that's trying to come in. So I invite you to explore that if that's a practice you think might be helpful to you. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Just gonna wrap it up here with a couple more ideas for you. So we get busy and sitting meditation might be a challenge, I realize, for many of us. And so there's ways that, like I mentioned the cooking example, there's ways that we can incorporate mindfulness into our day. Meditation is a great practice, and if you've got the time and space to begin to try to do that, it reaps tremendous benefits. I can say from my own experience and from the literature that you'll read that's out there. But if you can incorporate small steps of mindfulness into your day, it can also have a tremendous benefit. And that can be just taking time to simply press pause and do some mindful breathing like we just did. Not necessarily even with your eyes closed. If nobody's going to know the difference if you're sitting at your computer and looking at a picture instead of your work and just kind of focusing and breathing for a few minutes with your eyes open even. You can breathe rhythmically with counting. So in breath, 1, 2, 3, 1, out, 1, 2, 3, 2. One, so in and out, and that kind of extends the breath a bit, and the counting can help slow down the thoughts that are coming. And I would encourage you to, there's a really good practice of focusing on the out breath. So we tend to think when we notice that we're breathing in a shallow way, then we need to take a deep breath, and we focus on that inhalation. And what can happen if we focus too much is almost a hyperventilation, right? We're building, and then we can't catch our breath. And so if you can focus on the exhalation and maybe even extend that exhalation down deep into the belly, you'll find that the in-breath comes as a natural result of that pushing out of the air. So that's a good way to extend and deepen the breath as well. You can just stand up. We're sitting all day, and just stand and meditate. Don't need to, if you're around other people, it doesn't need to be anything looking weird. You can just kind of maybe look out a window or find a way to look at a focal point and just stand and calm yourself, just to break up the monotony of being in a chair all day. You can do it while walking down the hallway. We all have to go down the hallway a few times a day, I'm guessing. And so you can take that time to focus on your feet touching the floor and get in touch with that sensation. while you're going to and from the restroom or to get your water, whatever it might be. While working, you can practice presence. So, maybe take time to block out a period of time during your day for really focused work about something that you're excited or passionate about, so you can really connect to it without being distracted. Can reap tremendous benefits. And then pause to take a breath before meeting. So before you get onto Zoom, again, we might be stuck in that multitasking. Try just stopping and giving yourself just a minute before you join that next meeting to pause and take a few breaths like we've talked about. So Heather's asking, is disruptive, intrusive thoughts with a mantra similar to how some people cope with OCD? Again, I don't want to get myself too deep into medical territory. I will say we have an excellent center for OCD on campus here run by Carol Matthews, but I do know that there's a practice with OCD where, and I think this is different, where people will disrupt intrusive thoughts by telling them to stop, right? There's a stop it practice. And that's different from a mantra. A mantra is not saying stop, and it doesn't have that kind of sort of almost aggressive, which can be helpful to people with OCD to really, aggressively stop the thoughts when they're coming up. But a mantra is more of almost a soothing, rhythmic kind of quality. So an example of one that I've used is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, where I say it kind of, I'm saying that, and that's elaborate, you don't have to do this, but it helps me. It's one that I kind of took on early on to repeat over and over to myself, and it develops its own, it's like when you get a song caught in your head, except you're kind of controlling that song, but it has a repetitive soothing quality to it. And by doing that, you're focusing on that, and because it's verbal, it really stops some of the verbal stuff from coming in and being quite so distracting. So that's a little bit different, I think, than what you might be thinking of, Heather. Any other thoughts or questions? So I hope some of these ideas of how you can incorporate mindfulness into your day might help. There's a variety of, there's so many, like I said, sources on campus or in our community, if you're interested in going deeper and finding out more. I'm always happy to talk about this. It's a bit of my passion. So if you have questions or thoughts and you want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to provide any information that I can or answer questions if I'm able to, or point you to a source if I can. I'll also say that we are through UFHR, through our Worklife programs, and in partnership with the UF Mindfulness group, trying to find ways to help seed. If you have a group of people, like I'm happy to come in and do this presentation, and if you wanted to try to see if there were enough people kind of in your department or area that are interested in sitting together on a regular basis, which is a little challenging right now. Ideally, that's in the physical, present space, but it can happen via Zoom as well. I'm happy to come in and kind of help you get something started in your department if you'd ever like to reach out to me for that purpose as well. Or just if you'd like to bring this to your faculty or staff meeting or any kind of group meeting that you might have and you think it might benefit, I'm happy to come pay a visit via Zoom right now. So any other thoughts or questions before we wrap up? Wow. Thank you very much for joining me today. I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving next week. I hope this helps. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for being here. And please don't hesitate to provide us any feedback or suggestions of future programs like this that might be of benefit to you and your organization. So thank you. All right, everybody, take care. Thank you.